Well, for more on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, we can cross to Ramallah and speak to Bushra Khalidi, who is in the West Bank and is the West Bank policy lead for Oxfam. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on France 24. According to Oxfam, the daily death rate in Gaza proves that what's happening there is deadlier than in any other conflict so far this century. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And we're now at 250 Palestinians in Gaza killed a day in the 104th day of the war. It's unprecedented. And really what we have seen in Gaza and what's happened in the last 3 months has been unprecedented at every level, whether that's the impact on the health sector that is merely operating, on the wash sector that is not operating, causing a sanitation crisis really with the sewage in the street and no power plants, no desalination plants, no wastewater treatment plants operating. I mean, it's as my brother-in-law said, who lives in Gaza, it's hell on earth.
Yeah, and what we can gather as well is that even the places that are supposed to be safe, like Rafah, where people were told to go to, aren't at all safe because people have been dying there even in the last couple of hours. But even more than bombardment, and you mentioned the sanitation situation, but in our report we were looking there at people who can't even find enough to eat. And on top of that, we've got a bitterly cold weather situation. So in fact, disease, famine, those two factors could be even deadlier than the bombardment.
Absolutely. I mean, you said it yourself, and the WHO weeks ago actually had raised the alarm that people might die more from disease than from bombs. We have a widespread, rampant spread of diarrhea. You know what the risks and the consequences of diarrhea is on infants. We're hearing horror stories of 7-Up mixed with milk formula fed to babies because clean water can't be found. I mean, just absolutely horrific stories, people eating cat and dog food, people eating leaves. Starvation, 90% of people in Gaza are starving and famine is looming. Just the numbers, the demographic numbers at every level are just horrifying and shocking and have been, highlighted by the highest at UN level, including Griffiths and Gutierrez, at how alarming the situation is. Yet a ceasefire has not yet happened. 3 months in, people are, dying from bombs, from disease, and potentially from the cold now arriving. Just as you say, there are now tent cities forming in the roads, in the middle of the roads. There's no toilets, there's no bathrooms, and here we're in the Middle East. When it rains, it pours. It's torrential rains. We saw flooding last week in Gaza, and quite literally tents floating as boats would on in a river or in a sea. The conditions are absolutely horrifying. My family is in Gaza. They don't have windows. They're cold and they don't have clothes because they had to evacuate so quickly that they couldn't take all of their things with them. And they cannot find clothes for the kids, winter clothes, because there's nothing available on the market. Because however much aid comes into Gaza, how is humanitarian response supposed to respond to the needs of 1.9 million people? It's absurd and it's unreasonable to expect that from the humanitarian community.
I mean, you mentioned incredible needs on the ground. Up to 2 million people there living in a state of total misery and absolutely appalling conditions. But what percentage of aid, as far as you're aware, is actually getting through across? Go ahead.
Currently, we're meeting 10 to 13, maybe 15% of needs a day. So that represents, a few 100,000 people. We're talking about millions. We're talking half of which are children. And aid is, not the only thing we've been asking for as a humanitarian community. Our aid workers have been killed at unprecedented rates. How are we supposed to deliver without humanitarian workers and teams coming in? How are we supposed to work without ambulances? And also the crossings have been closed. We have Kerem Shalom operating, not at its full capacity how it used to before 7th of October. There are other crossings that have remained closed. The water and the electricity remain shut by Israel and have remained shut since the 9th of October, since Israel decided to besiege Gaza even more. So, these are also measures that Israel has taken that are exacerbating the humanitarian situation. And it's not abiding by international law by doing so.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time, but I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Bushra Khalidi in the West Bank, the policy lead for Oxfam there. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time.
Thank you.